"Yes, lord," I said. "I shall give you a gift for her. Maybe that jewelled collar the Saxon leader was wearing. You think she'd like that?" He asked the question anxiously. "Well, any woman would," I said. The collar was Saxon work, crude and heavy, but still beautiful. It was a necklace of golden plates that were splayed like the sun's rays and studded with gems. "Good. Take it to Donavaria for me, Devil. Then go and save Benwick." "If I can," I said grimly. "If you can," Arthur echoed. "For my conscience's sake." He added the last words quietly, then kicked a scrap of clay tile that skittered away from his booted foot and startled a cat that arched its back and hissed at us. 3 years ago," he said softly. "It all seems so easy." But then came Guinevere. Next day, with 60 men, I went south.
"Did he send you to spy on me?"
Guinevere demanded with a smile. "No, lady."
"Dear Derval," she mocked me. "So like my husband."
That surprised me. "Am I?"
"Yes, Derval, you are. Only he's much cleverer. Do you like this place?"
She gestured about the courtyard. "It's beautiful," I said. The villa in Donavaria was, of course, Roman, though in its day it had served as Uther's winter palace. God knows it would not have been beautiful when he occupied it, but Guinevere had restored the building to something of its former elegance. The courtyard was colonnaded like the one in Duroca Brevis, but here all the roof tiles were in place, and all the columns were lime-washed. Guinevere's symbol was painted on the walls inside the arcade in a repeating pattern of stags crowned with crescent moons. The stag was her father's symbol, the moon her addition, and the painted roundels made a pretty show. White roses grew in beds where small tiled channels ran with water. 2 hunting falcons stood on perches, their hooded heads twitching as we walked around the Roman arcade. Statues stood about the courtyard, all of naked men and women, while on plinths beneath the colonnade were bronze heads festooned with flowers. The heavy Saxon necklace I had brought from Arthur now hung about the neck of one of those bronze heads. Guinevere had toyed with the gift for a few seconds, then frowned.
"It's clumsy work, is it not?"
she had asked me. "Prince Arthur thinks it's beautiful, lady, and worthy of you."
"Dear Arthur."
She had said it carelessly, then selected the ugly bronze head of a scowling man and placed the necklace around its neck.
"That'll improve him," she said of the bronze head. "I call him Gorfithid. He looks like Gorfithid, don't you think so?"
"He does, lady," I said. The bust did have something of Gorfithid's dour, unhappy face.
"Gorfithid is a beast," Guinevere said. "He tried to take my virginity."
"He did," I managed to say, when I had recovered from the shock of the revelation.
"Tried and failed," she said firmly. "He was drunk. He slobbered all over me. I was reeking with slobber. All down here."
She brushed her breasts. She was wearing a simple white linen shift that fell in straight folds from her shoulders to her feet. The linen must have been breathtakingly expensive, for the fabric was so tantalizingly thin that if I stared at her, which I tried not to do, it was possible to see hints of her nakedness beneath the fine cloth. The golden image of the moon-crowned stag hung around her neck. Her earrings were amber drops set in gold, while on her left hand was a gold ring crowned with Arthur's bear and cut with a lover's cross.
"Slobber, slobber," she said delightedly. "So, when he'd finished, or to be exact, when he'd finished trying to begin, and was sobbing about how he meant to make me his queen, and how he would make me the richest queen in Britain, I went to Orworth and had him make me a spell against an unwanted lover. I didn't tell the druid it was the king, of course, though it probably wouldn't have mattered if I had, because Iorwerth would do anything if you smiled at him. So he made the charm and I buried it. Then I made my father tell Gorfythid that I'd buried a death charm against the daughter of a man who'd tried to rape me. Gorfythid knew who I meant, and he dotes on that insipid little Cynwyn, so he avoided me after that.
She laughed.
Men are such fools.
Not Prince Arthur, I said firmly, being careful to use the title on which Guinevere insisted.
He is a fool about jewellery, she had said tartly,
and then had asked me if Arthur had sent me to spy on her. We walked on around the colonnade. We were alone. A warrior named Lanval was the commander of the princess's guard, and he had wanted to leave his men inside the courtyard, but Guinevere insisted they leave.
Let them start a rumour about us, she told me happily,
but then had scowled.
I sometimes think Lanval is ordered to spy on me.
Lanval merely watches over you, lady, I told her, for upon your safety depends Prince Arthur's happiness, and upon his happiness rests a kingdom.
That is pretty, Derval. I like that.
She spoke half mockingly. We walked on. A bowl of rose petals soaking in water wafted a pretty scent under the colonnade that offered welcome shade from the hot sun.
Do you want to see Lunette?
Guinevere suddenly asked me. I doubt she wants to see me.
Probably not. But you're not married, are you?
No, lady. We never married.
Then it doesn't matter, does it?
She asked. Though what did not matter, she did not say, and I did not ask.
I wanted to see you, Derval,
Guinevere said earnestly. You flatter me, lady, I said.
Your words get prettier and prettier.
She clapped her hands, then wrinkled her nose.
Tell me, Derval, do you ever wash?
I blushed. Yes, lady.
You stink of leather and blood and sweat and dust. It can be quite a nice aroma, but not today. It's too hot. Would you like my ladies to give you a bath? We do it the Roman way, with lots of sweat and scraping. It's quite tiring.
I deliberately moved a step away from her. I'll find a stream, lady.
But I did want to see you, she said.
She stepped back next to me, and even put her arm into mine.
Tell me about Nimue.
Nimue? I was surprised by the question.
Can she really do magic?
Guinevere asked eagerly. The princess was as tall as I was, and her face, so handsome and high-boned, was close to mine. Proximity to Guinevere was overpowering, like the heavy disturbance of the senses given by the drink of Mithras. Her red hair was scented with perfume, and her startling green eyes were lined with a gum that had been mixed with lampblack, so that they seemed larger.
Can she do magic?
Guinevere asked again. I think so.
Think.
She stepped away from me, disappointed.
Only think.
The scar on my left hand throbbed, and I did not know what to say. Guinevere laughed.
Tell me the truth, Derval. I need to know.
She put her arm back into mine and walked me on beneath the arcade shade.
That horrible man, Bishop Sansom, is trying to make us all Christians, and I won't put up with it. He wants us to feel guilty all the time, and I keep telling him I've nothing to be guilty about. But the Christians are getting more powerful. They're building a new church here. No, they're doing worse than that. Come.
She turned impulsively and clapped her hands. Slaves ran into the courtyard, and Guinevere ordered her cloak and dogs brought to her.
I'll show you something, Derval, so you can see for yourself what that wretched little bishop is doing to our kingdom.
She donned a mauve woolen cloak to hide the thin linen shift, then took the leashes of a brace of deerhounds that panted beside her, with their long tongues lolling between sharp teeth. The villa's gates were thrown open, and with 2 slaves following and a quartet of Lanval's guards hastily forming post on either side of us, we went down Durnavaria's main street, which was handsomely paved with wide stones and guttered to take the rain down to the river that ran to the east of the town. The open-fronted shops were full of goods, shoes, a butchery, salt, a potter. Some houses had collapsed, but most were in good repair, perhaps because the presence of Mordred and Guinevere had brought the town a new prosperity. There were beggars, of course, who shuffled close on stumps, risking the guards' spear staves in order to grab the copper coins distributed by Guinevere's 2 slaves. Guinevere herself, her red hair bare to the sun, strode down the hill with barely a glance at the commotion her presence caused.
"See that house?"
Guinevere gestured towards a handsome 2-story building on the northern side of the street.
"That's where Nabur lives, and where our little king farts and vomits." She shuddered. "Mordred is a particularly unpleasant child. He limps, and he never stops screaming. There! Can you hear him?"
I could indeed hear a child wailing, though whether it was Mordred I could not tell.
"Now, come through here,"
Guinevere commanded, and she plunged through a small crowd who stared at her from the side of the street, then climbed over a pile of broken stone that stood next to Nabur's handsome house. I followed her to find that we had reached a building site, or rather a place where one building was being torn down and another erected on its ruin. The building that was being destroyed had been a Roman temple.
"It was where people worshipped Mercury," Guinevere said. "But now we're to have a shrine for a dead carpenter instead. And how will a dead carpenter give us good crops? Tell me that."
These last words, ostensibly spoken to me, were said loud enough to disturb the dozen Christians who were labouring at their new church. Some were laying stones, some adzing doorposts, while others were pulling down the old walls to provide the material for the new building.
"If you must have a hovel for your carpenter," Guinevere said in a ringing voice, "why not just take over the old building?" I asked Sansom that, but he says it must all be new, so that his precious Christians don't have to breathe air once used by pagans, in which nonsensical belief we pull down the old, which was exquisite, and throw up a nasty building full of ill-dressed stone and without any grace at all."
She spat into the dust to ward off evil.
"He says it's a chapel for Mordred. Can you believe it? He's determined to make the wretched child into a whining Christian, and this abomination is where he'll do it."
"Dear lady." Bishop Sansom appeared from behind one of the new walls, which were indeed ill-dressed compared with the careful masonry of the old temple's remains. Sansom was in a black gown, which, like his stiffly tonsured hair, was whitened with stone dust.
"You do us a striking honour by your gracious presence, lady," he said as he bowed to Guinevere. "I'm not doing you honour, you worm. I came to show Derval what carnage you're making. How can you worship in that?"
She threw her hand towards the half-built church.
"You might as well take over a cowshed." "Our dear Lord was born in a cattle shed, lady, so I rejoice that our humble church reminds you of one."
He bowed again to her. Some of his workers had gathered at the far end of their new building, where they began to sing one of their holy songs to ward off the baleful presence of pagans.
"It certainly sounds like a cowshed," Guinevere said tartly, then pushed past the priest and strode over the masonry-littered ground to where a wooden hut leaned against the stone and brick wall of Nabur's house. She released her hound's leashes to let them run free. "Where's that statue, Sansom?"
She threw the question over her shoulder as she kicked the hut door open.
"Alas, gracious lady, though I tried to save it for you, our blessed Lord commanded that it be melted down. For the poor, you understand."
She turned on the bishop savagely.
"Bronze? What use is bronze to the poor? Do they eat it?"
She looked at me.
"A statue of Mercury, Derval, the height of a tall man and beautifully worked. Beautiful. Roman work, not British, but now it's gone. Melted in a Christian furnace because you people—"
She was staring at Sansom again, with loathing on her strong face.